All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual panel, How Data Can Shape Higher Education. I'm Tracy. I'm the marketing manager of Amplify in North America, and we have a truly globally spanned panel today for you. We'll start off with the furthest from me. That's David Neal. He comes from Scotland, and he is a consulting director at Amplify. Myself, I'm located in Atlanta. Next up, there's Casey Kolowinski, who is our Cimarkey practice director here at Amplify. And lastly, Stephen Lynn over in Washington. Stephen is joining us from Cimarkey, where he is the product marketing manager. Thank you all so much for joining us for this today. So let's get into things. As many of us have lived our own higher education experiences, we often think back to how things could have been better or what our favorite parts were. So we come here today to discuss how data being unified into a single platform can greatly shape the student lifecycle on business, student, and technical aspects by diving into three specific phases: enrollment, student life, and alumni. So in the case of higher education, you can very much look at student data as what us in the data industry consider customer or party data. Would you agree, David?
Yep, that's absolutely right. There's definitely parallels, Tracy. The way students expect to be interacted with nowadays is continuing to change and evolve, and there's a lot more focus that institutions need to put on how to engage and keep that student body engaged throughout the life cycle, as I'm sure we'll kind of touch on today. But really getting that engagement from the student body becomes vital to that institution's success.
Stephen, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would say higher ed is really kind of going through a lot of the same challenges that a lot of other industries are, especially with we say like the growth of technologies and volume of data that they have to manage to just kind of run. A lot of it is, again, similar to other industries, built on this legacy infrastructure that's not really adapted to, take in this new changes as quickly as they can to, meet the demands that are a better experience, right? What they expect from, other applications or use cases that students probably use. And they're like, hey, why is my student, college application or higher ed process not as good as, something else I'm used to growing up? And then the other thing, to really think about it is not just taking this completely as a technology lens, just because you get a technology solution or, get some consultants to put that up. There's a lot of people and processes kind of involved to make it all work. So, if we only take a look at it at one lens, you kind of miss, all the other pieces that make it work. So that's, I think, what I would really add is, don't just think about it as technology, but, who all needs to be rallied in, what all needs to be kind of changed a little bit to make sure that the technology actually suits, what you really are looking for to solve.
Yeah, like we talk a lot at Amplify about how it all comes down to people, then process, then technology. So at that point, let's take a moment and we're going to go through the three different phases and how some problem statements of each of these can be kind of fixed or looked at in a better lens whenever you introduce data into it. So give me a second. I'm gonna get in my role here. I am a recent high school graduate, which was a very long time ago, looking to get admission to a local university. How can data help me transition? Stephen?
Yeah, so, I'm going to speak from personal experience because my cousin actually just got accepted into university, and I was helping him with kind of his application process. And, I went through the challenges. So I thought, okay, it's been a while, so things probably have gotten a little bit better. But not many things have changed, unfortunately. So, from his experience, he actually goes to a local university to take, to take courses there for like AP credits and college credits. So he's already in the system. But when he applied again, they didn't recognize him as the same person. So, right off the bat, like that kind of deteriorates his experience because he's like, I've already entered all this information, gave them all of this, but they still don't know who I am, which doesn't make sense, right? Because I've been taking classes for, this whole year. So, that's kind of, one thing is, who is the student, right? And this is a problem recurring because if you don't have one view of who this person is, you're always trying to keep asking them to do the same thing over and over again at each stage before they even, get on the campus, right? So that experience for them is already really bad, right? And then compounding that, you're not the only university he applies to. He's applying to, other universities. He's doing the same thing. And even if he's using something that's supposed to be shared, like a Common App, for example, he has to do the same thing over and over again, putting his transcripts, his SAT scores, which he should probably only do once, right, in an ideal scenario. Then as he kind of, accepts the criteria, accepts his position into the university, he'll probably have to re-enter this thing again, right? Before he even enrolls in the classes. He has to then get his medical transcripts, his scholarships, all these other things that should have already been done, one and done, or at least have one place to do that. So that's a really bad experience on his part before he goes in. But then, kind of looking at the lens of the administrative side, there's probably spending a lot of time, just reading his emails and thousands of other the incoming class emails and saying, okay, here's, they just sent me this email for the scholarship or the medical records that I had to put that in and manually enter it into the system. But again, that system might not have everything for this one student. So then I had to go look at another system and maybe look at Excel to see if this is the same match. So it really gets cumbersome also on the administrative side because they're spending so much time doing this redundant work and not really, potentially spending that focus on, understanding how can I make the student experience better? What would they actually need incoming? Because maybe I see trends of like, a lot of students wanting to do computer science classes, right? But I don't have nearly enough professors ready. So how can I anticipate those needs better so I can resource it up? So, really at the beginning, right, when you're onboarding enrollment, a lot of the frustrations of the student experience start there. And, if that is your kind of first, their first impression, every step of the journey, when they go to the other stages of their student life, it just decreasingly gets worse and worse. So that's just kind of painting a picture of what, a lot of universities are going through from a personal experience side. So, kind of flipping that around, how does, data help with that, right? So, obviously data is pretty much necessary at this stage now to be able to do pretty much anything, right? Because there's so much data, especially sensitive and important data to help kind of understand who the student is, what they need, and, what resources they're coming in with. So without, the single view of who this one student is and everything that they're related to, it's hard to, again, resource around what that student needs. And then when you expand that to, thousands of students, it's hard to, make sure that you appropriately allocate the right time and, staff and faculty to make sure that they're getting truly the best experience that they deserve. And then, it also helps the administrative side, reducing all that burden of, manually doing all the data input, the data entry, cleaning up all that data just to make sure that, as they go out throughout their life, you can track their progress and, adapt to what they need when situations change. So that's a big part of, having some, a data management solution, all in one place, to do a lot of this ugly work for you, just so the students can have a better experience, but also, administratively, reduce a lot of that burden and then focus on, how can I make this better for the next wave of students or the rest of that student's life cycle. So that's, my brief on what I think the onboarding enrollment process is based on a very personal experience.
Yeah, it's definitely something that can be improved.
Yeah, and I think as well, like you see a lot of institutions now have maybe already embarked on a technology-led journey towards having this idea of a student portal, somewhere to log into and manage all the different services and things that institution has to offer, and that can start right from this onboarding process. But actually being able to do that without having one eye on where all your data lives and how you're going to manage that as it scales up and as you bring in more students, because thinking about it in isolation is probably quite straightforward. And then how you evolve that service offering over time to keep that student body engaged, that can become quite difficult. So that kind of MDM solution really starts to come into its own when institutions are looking to innovate, when they're looking to create these places for students to digitally come together, or even self-serve in this example that Stephen's been talking to. So it really, really comes into its own with these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the new generation that's coming in. All they know is technology. The more you can automate and put things in front of them that don't involve talking to a person over the phone is great, right? That's always going to be a good scenario as we progress more and more into the technology age, right? It's just a good thing.
And as a result, they like to do so much of the work or the act of doing things on their own.
Yeah.
All right. So we're in student life now. I've been admitted and I'm in my second year of university life now. So I'm changing majors because everybody changes majors at least a couple of times in college, right? Because nobody knows what they want to do until a couple of years in. And I've started filing my own taxes. So, I'm practically an adult now. Financial aid is impacted among many other things. How can we help in this kind of situation? What do you think, Casey?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of rehashing a few things that Stephen and David have said already, but one of the first things to consider is the modern student just will not accept being treated like a number or another cog in the machine. It's a total mindset shift in today's youth. So as an organization, it's important to understand that and build with the times, right? It's more important than ever to know more about what is happening with a student across the board in every capacity, right? So one of the biggest things there is to have a system that's capable of tracking everything, right? Let's not just have a system for financial aid, a system for their majors. Let's bring it all together, right? That when it's all together, it's going to ease the administrative burden, as we said before, to make sure that these students are progressing through the different stages of their journey in a productive way, right? I think we've all heard a story about a kid that changes a major or he fails a class because he has trouble adjusting. He gets lost in the shuffle. So if we bring all that data into one place, one scenario, we're able to keep detailed records of every time that type of scenario happens. And it becomes a lot easier to build processes around those items to even automate the issue in a friendly and productive way, right? We can send extra warnings and information out to the student, say, hey, look, if you're struggling, here are the resources. Here is your counselor. Let's get you going back on track, figure out what you need to do. When a major change happens, right, you may have to stay in school longer, right? It's a different level of credits.
I had that whole experience myself. Like the requirements for my degree kept changing, but there was like no notifier. So yeah,
exactly. So you're just kind of in this no man's land. Well, if all of this is in one spot, the student either can go get it and see it easily, a lot easier, or you build that automation and administration. It just kind of trickles downstream for you. And then it just helps, right? And aside from that, a lot of organizations are using different pieces of software, multiple different systems, and that takes away your ability to be flexible and react in near real time, right? So the system may not update that major change for a month. Well, what's happened in that month may affect the future of that student, right? So by moving to a single source of truth in an MDM solution of some sort, right, that it brings it all together. You track financial changes, majors. The org can just act quicker, and they know everything they need is all in one spot, right? And again, we go back to that automation. And if you have automation that puts things out in front of a student, they're going to have a better student life cycle because they're gonna feel valued. They're gonna be surprised when you know almost as fast as they know that they're changing a major, right?
Right.
That's impressive to a person, and it makes them feel valued and keeps your students happy. So
and similarly as well, though, Casey, that idea of an MDM platform being able to unify those data points as an institution responds to changes in what students need, or as it tries to explore better ways of helping students through those areas that, as you say, they may get lost in the shuffle. We've all seen time and again organizations be in a situation where they may invest in a point solution. They may invest in something that solves that very specific niche and that specific problem, but that it almost creates an island of data that doesn't really talk to the rest of the organization. So knowing that you're solving the active, pressing and changing problems of your student body in this case, but also being able to connect it to all those other data points that you are used to operating with, just makes it so much easier, I think, for an institution to navigate.
Definitely. We talk about those processes. Well, the counselors, the professors, they benefit from that type of thing too, that says the counselor sees that major change or the financial change, right? And they see it. And even if you don't automate it fully, they now have better visibility and can be proactive instead of reactive.
Yeah.
So let's change gears just a little bit there. So in a little less direct example, let's think about some overlooked things that a campus organization needs to take a look at to help improve student life, right? So campus safety, classroom equipment, electronic devices across campus, on-campus jobs, a whole bunch of these things that we don't necessarily think of, but if they're not there and not maintained properly, student life degrades, right?
Yeah, that other MDM, mobile device management.
Exactly. And often, organizations leave that up, that type of stuff up to an IT team, or it's all these separate, like David said, point solutions that may contain what they need to contain, but they're not easy to get to unless you own that application, right?
Right.
So, when the organization takes the time to realize that all of these things are master data and they should be tracked, maintained, mastered, made better, right? That overall student life just gets better. They don't have to worry about, are there enough computers to get my work done in the library? Are there enough safety buttons on campus that I'm going to feel safe walking home late from the library? Those things aren't tangible when you're actually thinking about data, but they're data you need in that organization to make sure you're doing what's correct, right?
Yeah.
Check out equipment, having the latest whiteboard technologies. We're talking about making sure that internet connections are stable in the dorms, all these things that are just part of doing business as a campus. Let's get that all into another place that we can master that data. And it's, again, all the people that need to see it can see it and keep it in that one place.
That proper governance.
Exactly. And the beauty of a platform, an MDM platform like Semarchy or otherwise, is that everything you can think of that contains that data can be made into these series of solutions, but they're all under the same roof, right? They can all talk to each other as much or as little as the organization needs. But the point being, when that's done, when you get everything under one roof, your efficiency just rises exponentially. Your ability to be robust while still being flexible goes up through the roof, and it becomes a reachable target, not just this pie in the sky thing that nobody can actually get to. We can start putting these solutions together and eventually have one giant platform. Really, bringing it all together is what it's all about. Semarchy Amplify. We're here to do just that.
Yeah. So we've made it through our life cycle as a student. We, did the unthinkable. We finally graduated and we got a job, and we're working, within or not within our actual major that we graduated with. How can higher ed institutions make better use of my data to help both themselves and me as an alumni? David?
Yep, and first of all, congratulations on your
Thank you.
graduation. I'm delighted for you. You know, a key driver of an institution's reputation is really showcased through the achievements of their alumni. It's often where, as a prospective student, I'm looking to see where people have gone on to, what sort of things they might be doing in their professional lives and in their careers. And so it becomes vital for institutions to keep that alumni engaged, to really understand the needs of that alumni and recognize the value of that alumni network to their operation, essentially. You know, alumni, as we know, can be that key source of funding. They can be a key driver in recruitment and not just for prospective students, but being able to help existing students on their journey, opportunities for mentorship, opportunities for collaborating with employers out in the market. So in many ways, it's funny that the success in the other stages that we've talked about today really set you up for success or failure in this particular part of the journey, because if you do it poorly, your relationship with your alumni could be at risk, or at least the percentage of your alumni that you might describe as being engaged with you as an institution is perhaps lower than you want it to be. But success in those other two stages really sets you up for meaningful and mutually valuable relationships with that alumni network. But don't get me wrong, there's challenges here, right? So what you see at the moment in a lot of institutions is that the process or the tasks involved in keeping track of that alumni body are quite manual, or could be very manual in some cases. That's taken a lot of time and effort away from people ultimately cultivating and nurturing meaningful relationships with that network. You know, and these things can get quite complex quite quickly. So if you think when you've graduated, you maybe take up a job, you maybe change job a few times, you play at different levels of seniority in organizations, your relationship with your institution might change over time as well. You might go from someone that's fairly disengaged following graduation, and actually over time there's touch points with that alumni network again, or touch points with that institution again, that bring you back into an event or through a conversation through your employer. So being able to track all of that becomes a bit of a minefield. You know, how do you spot a returning student? It sounds straightforward enough, right? But what if the gap's really big? How do we handle that? You know, so all of these things, as I say, take away from the true value add piece of how do we really nurture those relationships. And in this case, it really is about enabling those employed by institutions to focus on getting the value out of that exercise. You know, we've talked a lot already about the value of single source of truth, and of course that's absolutely useful in the alumni scenario. So being able to monitor changes in your alumni body, being able to forecast more adequately around future events or funding rates or placement rates, or identify mentorship opportunities before they're actually a thing, all put the institution on the front foot in terms of enablement and in terms of kind of future planning, and keeping that alumni involved, keeping them sticky to your institution. But more than that,
I just thought of a quick example, actually. Like think about, like, if I'm in chess club throughout college, right, and that's being tracked, somebody knows that I'm in a chess club, that can be used for better engagement down the line when the chess club is playing for the national title or something, right? Let's anyone that was involved in chess club, we have this list, we've mastered that data, we know all these alumni might be interested because it relates to something that they had a personal experience with, and that's what bringing it together is all about for me.
Yeah, it gets to the level of knowing the student as an individual.
I was just thinking for the first time, like, if I went to go back to school and I went back to the school that I graduated from and they knew of my degree and they didn't at least say, hey, welcome back, I'd be kind of upset.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, these are, for many people, regardless of when they interact with an institution through that student lens, these are formative years. These are significant moments in people's lives, and there's a lot of growing there professionally and personally when you go to an institution. So I agree, it's something that you want to be seen, be recognized, and feel valued. But I mean, not to completely pivot back to the brass tacks of the matter, but in a very practical sense, your bottom line is going to get affected if you're not managing essentially what is a joiner, mover, levers process, right? So having a master data management solution, as Casey was talking to around being able to manage things like devices, you could extend that to things like software licenses. I've not tried it recently, and it's been plenty of time since I've graduated. I would hope and pray that my institution doesn't let me log into my email anymore. I would hope and pray that my institution doesn't let me use that premium piece of software that they pay per seat, pay per user for. And I'm pretty sure that is probably the case. But we know that there's going to be plenty of institutions out there and organizations in general that haven't got that process tightened up to the point that you can see that cost saving be realized because people have graduated out. Essentially, they've become alumni, they're no longer entitled to the benefits that a current student might be. So MDM can really help you join the dots between kind of potentially disparate areas of your organization and potentially unlocking significant savings in the process.
And Dave, kind of to that point, right? A lot of the there's also the governance of compliance for those licenses. A lot of the education licenses are for educational use only. So in your case, if you're logging onto a premium software and you're using it for an enterprise, I'm not saying you are, but I know there are plenty of people who are like, hey, I can still log into this Adobe account that my university provided to me. There's a lot of compliance stuff that can come out of it, which are probably much larger costs than just if you were able to say, hey, they're not student anymore, they just can't get access to the license, right? Because last thing you want to happen is you're creating something for a client, they find out that you're using a student edition but for commercial use cases, right? So those relationships, kind of like Casey, David, you guys were mentioning, it extends beyond just a student, right? There's a whole ecosystem of everything that supports the student, from the resources on campus, those external, relationships with the employers, the software licenses, they're all related. And I think one of the other things to note is that, it seems really big, and it's not a one-person job to, manage this whole thing, right? That's kind of what the, platform and, some of the, advice that you guys give on, what the best processes and setup for an architecture for this is. But you still be fairly federated, and I focus on doing campus resources, I focus on doing student life, I focus on doing professors, but the underlying data is all shared. So then those relationships are actually utilized and leveraged, instead of, hey, I need to recopy and paste this data that I just found on this random Excel sheet or downloaded from this random thing, just so I make sure the student's up to date. So, I think that's kind of something to kind of ease the audience here is you don't have to, even though the ecosystem's large, it's not a one-person job, right? Still a team effort from across the institution, but the underlying kind of grunt work of keeping that consistent and automating, all that data to make sure it's usable, that can be done by the platform. And then you just kind of sit on top of it and make sure that the student life and everything around it works really well.
And that's very well put, Stephen. So just to round it all up, this is a virtual panel that has Amplify and Simarchy. So let's just touch on, why would Simarchy be the best for these use cases?
Yeah. So, flexibility, I think, gets mentioned a lot, right? Every institution has their own unique flair, I would say, right, of how they approach it. Some might be, very big on a certain academic field or research. One might be very sports oriented, right? So every university is different, and having, a strict kind of, here's what your university should look like to master all your data is a very kind of legacy approach, because you don't want to fit in what you're already doing really well into something that doesn't, support your needs for, making your student experience and all the relationships that support that better. So the good thing about Simarchy is it's very flexible, right? You kind of build it around what you're already doing. I'm already managing all these things. But the data is just getting overwhelming. I'm doing so much work mastering this and making sure I know where it is. So that's the key thing. I think is the flexibility of doing that, fitting it completely to what you're already doing really well, and doing it with like no code, right? So you don't have to have a huge IT team to do that. If you have your existing technical resources, you can understand it, but then with the help of like Amplify, really accelerate what really needs to be done, from a process perspective, from a people perspective, to really get the most out of that technology. So that's probably a 1-minute spiel on why Smarky would be the best solution for higher ed, especially for data management.
And from Amplify's perspective, we're very excited at how quickly we can bring value to an organization across not only just higher ed, but all across anything, right? We have a quick start approach that really means that we can get a tailored solution right in front of any organization really fast in something like 90 days. I mean, that's really quick, and it's really exciting to work with a tool that gives us that flexibility, but power as well, right? So it's just really, really exciting tool to use.
Yep. So you've heard it here today. Data is fueling higher education. It's going to be, if you're an institution that's not taking all of your data and trying to put it in a platform that unifies it all in one single place, you're going to be losing out on great experiences for your students across all the phases of the student life cycle. But on top of that, the main bottom line, it comes down to, you're going to be losing money because you're not thinking of all the little aspects in one single place. But it all comes down to having a unified data platform that you can, impact both student life and the institution. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today, and everyone that joined us on this virtual panel. Thank you. And I will be sending this out as a recording. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.